Welcome, everyone. This is Macro Technology Group's next webinar in our series of webinars we've been doing lately. This one will be AI at Work, Staying Secure with Microsoft Copilot. Last time, we went over the tool itself, how you can use it in productivity at work. And today's session is all about staying secure with Microsoft Copilot and understanding the new realities of AI workspace. I'm Nicholas Frangopoulos, Macro Technology Group's Technical Account Manager. Joining me once again is Ken Widmer, our CTO. And without further ado, let's start getting into it. So here's what we'll be covering. Part one, what's happening? We'll start with an overview of the current landscape, how AI is changing the way that we work, and what that means for you. We'll also highlight 3 major threats that you need to know about. And then next, we'll jump into how threats happen in real life. We'll walk real life use cases to show how these threats play out in actual organizations. And then part 3 will be how to prevent those threats. We'll share practical steps for setting governance, policy, and compliance, plus how to set up Copilot with visibility and train your human firewall. Then we'll wrap up with the next steps you can take to secure your organization's AI adoption. And of course, we'll have time for a Q&A at the end. Our goal is to give you the confidence to adopt AI securely so you can unlock its benefits without exposing your organization to unnecessary risk. So let's get started. Part 1, what's happening? Let's talk a little bit about the new AI threat landscape. With Copilot now part of our daily work and embedded in Microsoft 365, we're seeing new technology. And with new technology, of course, means new risks. Copilot sees what your users see, and that same access can expose sensitive data if guardrails are missing. There are 3 emerging threats you need to be aware of. Compromised Copilot. Attackers can hack Copilot accounts and quickly gather intelligence from Outlook, Teams, SharePoint, and OneDrive. Prompt injection. Hidden instructions can manipulate AI outputs, causing Copilot to reveal sensitive data or override organizational settings. And then last, shadow AI. Employees using unsanctioned tools outside company control, which can lead to data loss and compliance violations. So let's break these down. AI-generated phishing is becoming more convincing and personalized than ever. Prompt injection can hide malicious text, code, or documents, tricking Copilot into taking actions it shouldn't take. And shadow AI is when staff use public tools, such as competitors like ChatGPT, to work faster, but this risks copying sensitive data into public systems and lose control of that data. So let's kick off with our first major threat, compromised Copilot. Attackers can hack Copilot accounts to gather intelligence fast. Why is this so dangerous? Because Copilot has instant access to Outlook, Teams, OneDrive. If an attacker gets in, they can ask Copilot to summarize all finance-related files, identify who has access to vendor contracts, or even lists about mergers. The impact is real. 73% of enterprises have already experienced at least one AI-related security incident, and data exposure is the most common type. So what does this all mean for us? It means that AI-generated phishing is now more convincing and personalized than ever. The bottom line is that Copilot doesn't break your security, it exposes weak controls. If permissions aren't set correctly, sensitive data can be surfaced in ways you've never expected. That's why it's critical to have strong guardrails, clear policies, and ongoing monitoring to keep your organization's data safe. Now let's dive into threat number 2, prompt injection. Prompt injection is what gets tricked into turning on you by malicious actors. And here's how it works. Malicious instructions are hidden inside text code or documents. Copilot can unknowingly follow these commands, right? Reveal sensitive data from connected files, execute actions outside its intended purposes, or even override organizational instructions or security settings. This isn't just a theoretical risk either. In fact, 82% of financial institutions reported attempted prompt injection attacks, and 47% experienced at least one successful breach exposing data. This is why you and your users need to be vigilant about the prompts we use and the data we expose to AI tools. Even a seemingly harmless document or message could contain hidden instructions that manipulate Copilot's outputs. Let's talk about one of the biggest hidden risks in today's workplace, shadow AI. Shadow AI happens when well-meaning employees use public AI tools like ChatGPT or Gemini to work faster or solve problems. This sounds helpful, but it can create serious security gaps. Here's what's at stake. Employees might copy and paste sensitive or client data into public systems thinking it's just a quick shortcut. When that happens, we lose audit trails and control over suddenly information that should be protected outside our company's boundaries. This can violate compliance risks like HIPAA or PCI, putting the organization at risk. And the numbers are eye-opening. Only 24% of generative AI products are currently secured, even though 82% of companies say trustworthy AI is critical to their business. So, what do these threats look like in real life?
Yeah, so let's go over 3 cases that we've seen, starting with the overshared spreadsheet. All right, this little guy is Jordan. So Jordan is an office manager at a small company. Jordan's boss asked him to update the company directory. There's nothing crazy or outlandish with this ask. Since the company allows Jordan the use of Copilot, he decides to give it a try to speed things up. He opens up Copilot and types in a single prompt. Create a detailed table of current employees, include name, title, department, manager, work email, and all other info. He figures he'll give it a shot, so he lets Copilot get to work. It searches through files Jordan has made and ones that he have access to. And within seconds, it generates the requested table with all the employee details he needs. Jordan's pumped, right? A few seconds of his time, he creates this great employee table. But he notices something unexpected. Next to the columns are salary figures. At first, this catches him off guard, and he immediately notifies management. Management blames Copilot, but that's not what happened here. Copilot didn't break security. This wasn't some kind of prompt injection or data leak that Nicholas talked about earlier. Copilot and Jordan followed all the rules that were given to them. Copilot only pulled information from files that Jordan was already allowed to see. See, the issue is, in this case, HR had stored a master spreadsheet and SharePoint that contained everything Jordan asked for, plus salary information. That file happened to live in a library with access granted to Jordan. Jordan had permission to view the file the whole time. He just didn't realize it because he doesn't work in HR and never tried to access the site or file before. Because it's not synced to his computer, he didn't even realize the file or the site existed. Copilot didn't create the security gap. It revealed one that had been quietly hiding in plain sight.
Wow. Thanks for that, Ken. I think one of the things to take away there too is that, like you said, it revealed something. It wasn't something that Copilot created. And that's why it's always important to secure your environments. So for our second use case, let's talk about one of the biggest hidden risks in today's workplace, shadow AI. Shadow AI equals shadow risk. So what's the case? Imagine an engineer pastes codes with credentials into ChatGPT to fix a PowerShell script. Internal data, such as usernames, passwords, domain names, they now exist outside company control. Logs show exposure of environment details, which is a blueprint into your systems.
It's things we got to worry about, right? And here we're going to go into this helpful rep. So this one's going to be Daniel. Daniel is an account manager, right? His job is the main point of contact for several key clients. He handles everything from support escalations to building questions, follow-ups, right? He works mostly out of his inbox. So in this scenario, it's first thing Monday morning, Daniel comes in, he opens up his inbox to find a massive email waiting for him. I mean, this thing's a novel. It's packed with PII information like names, phone numbers, account, billing information, plus a long thread, a list of questions, and several attachments referenced in the email. His head's spinning. This is an important client. He needs to get things right. He doesn't know where to start, but knows he needs a clear, concise summary of everything that's going on in the email and a simple plan list so he doesn't miss a single thing when responding. Thankfully, Daniel's organization just purchased Copilot, While it's new to the team, he's one of the first to give it a shot. Daniel sees this as the perfect chance. Without leaving Outlook, he opens up Copilot and types a quick prompt. Give me a bulleted overview. What are my action items? Within seconds, Copilot delivers exactly what he needs. A bulleted summary, the key accounts, pulled everything together with a clear to-do list, confirm the addresses, call schedule, updates the tickets, everything that he needs to move forward. Daniel Daniel didn't paste anything into a personal chat GPT or use an outside tool. He stayed inside of Outlook using the Microsoft 365 Copilot exactly how it was intended. But even when everything looks right on the surface, it raises a very important question. Was this truly safe to do, or did he expose sensitive information without realizing it? Could the way he used Copilot in this example conflict with company policy, privacy standards, or even PII requirements? No bad intent by Daniel, but were the rules broken because they weren't defined?
Right. So now we've gone over some threats there, Ken. I think it's time to talk about how we can prevent, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's important before we roll out any tool across any organization is to build guardrails. So, like we're talking about AI here, this is no different than anything else. We need to sit down and set clear governance, a clear policy, and make sure that we meet compliance standards before we roll the tool out, right? To do this, the first step is to define acceptable AI use for the organization. What is that, right? So to start, you'll need to define what data can and cannot go into prompts. So employees know exactly where the line is. For example, your organization might be okay with internal documents going to AI, but maybe not client records, personal information, or financial info based on compliance concerns, which is fair, right? So then next, we have to decide when AI outputs require human review. The general rule is that every AI response should be treated as a draft. Look, AI is still fairly new and it gets things wrong. A practical example would be before info is shared with the client, information from AI is added to a report or used to make a decision, someone needs to verify it. Finally, it's about accountability. And this is not just holding the employees accountable for AI use, but also who's doing oversight, right? Who's overseeing the implementation and the governance, and where does reporting go? The role should be clear, right? Who monitors AI usage, who reviews exceptions, who steps in if something goes wrong. Without that ownership, policies become suggestions. So before anybody starts prompting, we need to define rules.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Ken. It's one thing to have something as a guideline. It's another thing to actually enforce it, right? So now that we've covered the key threats and the importance of strong governance, let's shift gears a little and look at what practical policy can actually look like in your organization. So Ken, I'm going to hand things over to you shortly, but notate that this is kind of a sample AI acceptable use policy that we drafted for you guys to present here. Over the next few slides, Ken's going to break potential elements, what needs to be included, how to set clear boundaries, and how to make sure your teams know exactly what's expected when using AI tools like it. So with that being said, take it away, Ken.
All right. So this is where it all starts, right? The beginning of the document, purpose. Why do we need an AI policy? The goal here isn't to slow people down. It's actually the opposite. It's to unlock productivity and creativity that AI tools like Copilot easily bring. But we also need to protect the company, client data, the employees, and the company as a whole, right? So a strong policy sets the bar for responsible use. It tells employees exactly how to use AI to draft, summarize, or analyze information with the same level of discretion we expect from any other business system. It removes guesswork, right? So there's no gray areas, no uncertainty about what's okay to use or share. Clear guardrails mean we can move fast, be innovative without taking additional risk for data exposure or compliance violations in the process. The purpose, again, is to be smart, have secure AI adoption that helps the organization grow, we do not want to introduce another risk.
Absolutely.
So we're going to go into scope, right? So this is a very short section, but it's incredibly crucial. It sets who this policy applies to. In short, it's everybody: employees, contractors, interns, approved vendors. If you work in our system, documents, and environment in any way, you're included. It also goes into when it does apply, right? So anytime you use AI in connection with any company data, that means if company data shows up in a prompt, a file upload, an email attachment, or even if the output analyzed or generated is used, you're operating under this policy. So it doesn't matter if it's a quick draft or a full-blown workflow. If AI touches company data, the rules apply. The scope is simple, but covers all systems, all communication, all data, whether it's in the cloud, integrated into another tool, or completely standalone. Shortly, right, you're handling company data and AI in any way, this policy applies to you.
Absolutely.
All right, so now we're going to get into the heart of the policy, the part that sets the guardrails. All right, the first section here is approved AI tools. This starts by making it crystal clear what's actually allowed. This sample policy only allows organizational licensed tools like Microsoft 365 approved for use. This means no personal ChatGPT accounts, no Gemini accounts, no browser extensions that process company data. Anything unsanctioned is not permitted for use and should be blocked. This clarity removes any uncertainty for employees and completely shuts down shadow AI. Right? The next section we see here is data use and classification. Right? It defines what kind of data can be used. So in our sample policy, it limits AI use to internal, non-sensitive business information. Right? So in this example, no personal information, no client restricted data, no PII, no PHI should ever go into a prompt. We will get into more, we will get more into that on an upcoming slide, but even though Microsoft and Copilot work in the same ecosystem, you have to remember that compliancy requirements and data handling still need to apply to Copilot specifically. Human review and accountability. This is every AI generated output must be reviewed by a human before it's shared externally or treated as final. This is a critical step for anything involving clients, financial, legal deliveries, right? So AI can help you draft, but it can't decide. Each employee remains fully responsible for accuracy, tone, and compliance. The last section here is privacy and model use. So this section reinforces privacy protections. On top of that, employees are required to complete annual AI safety training so everyone understands what's safe to share and what isn't. The goal of all this is confidence, not confusion. So that's no exception to privacy and compliance. The do's and don'ts. So in this section is optional, right? But it's the part that everyone actually remembers. The practical, day-to-day, rule-based on the policy the company outlined prior. So we'll start with the do's because this is how we want employees to use AI. In our example, Copilot is safe for internal tasks, things like drafting, summarizing, analyzing, or rewording internal content. Always verify accuracy and tone before sending or publishing anything that comes from AI. Keep inputs minimal. It should only include what's necessary to get the result you needed. And if you ever think data might have been mishandled or exposed, you need to report it immediately. Fast reporting is how we prevent small mistakes turning into big issues. Yeah. And the don'ts. Everyone's favorite section, right?
Yeah.
Never enter passwords, credentials, API, or secrets to any AI prompt. Don't upload a reference, client data, or personal information without authorization. Do not assume AI output is automatically correct. Everything needs that human validation before it's shared or used. Avoid unapproved tools, plugins, extensions, and never remove confidential markings or anything else to try to bypass protections. Again, the theme here is simple. Copilot can assist you, but you are responsible. It's about using AI confidently, safely, and within the boundaries that the organization needs to keep the organization secure.
Absolutely. So, yeah, Ken, let's get into setting governance and compliance a little bit
Yeah.
more in detail.
Look, every organization already lives under some combination of compliance frameworks, right? It could be HIPAA, PCI, SOC 2, FERPA. There's others depending on your industry. Those frameworks shouldn't sit on one side and AI sit on the other. The goal here is to connect everything. So if your organization is handling patient data under HIPAA or payment data under PCI, the same safeguards that protect the data everywhere else need to apply to AI tools like Copilot. That means reviewing business associate agreements, data processing agreements to confirm they're actually including AI use. And if they don't, that should be your signal that that type of data cannot be allowed into AI. But if they do, and you already have DLP policies that are doing data labeling, classification controls in place, these can be easily expanded into your AI use. The key here is alignment determines position. Whether or not AI can touch regulated data isn't a technical decision, it's a compliance decision. And just as important, compliance isn't a one-time checkbox. There is a section that says reasonable safeguards. Now, this extends to things like AI policies, training, oversight. Employees need to understand exactly how to use Copilot and when they can and can't use it with client and company information. So the lens to take a look all this through, right? Sorry, is take your existing standards, extend those protections to AI, and make sure your agreements and safeguarding actually match what your security and standards are allowing.
Completely right. Especially that, when. I like that you touched on that, when they can use it, because I think a lot of people think, this tool's here to assist me, right? But they don't think about when it's appropriate to have it assist. I think a lot of people just look for that quick shortcut, that we touched on before.
Yeah, or where does the data lie after, right? Yeah, so we talked about the framework, and the next step logically is just to start to configure Copilot with configuration controls. So the first thing you want to do is restrict Copilot's access to sensitive SharePoint sites, right? So what does this mean? This means narrowing the search scope so Copilot only sees the data it should. Some examples would be exclude personal OneDrive sites, Teams channels. You want to shift away from an allow all model to an allow list, where only approved SharePoint sites are permitted. This keeps sensitive information, legacy data from accidentally being exposed through prompts. You also want to review SharePoint permissions before Copilot can access the site. And this would include disabling anyone links, right? After we do that, after we do that, we can go into the purview module. Ideally, you pair this with E5 compliance licensing for data discovery and protection. What Purview does is allows you to classify and label content so Copilot knows exactly how to treat it. So an example would be if a document is labeled confidential, that label transfers with the file. So Copilot respects this boundary automatically. And if you have E5, you can turn on auto labeling in SharePoint, OneDrive, and Exchange. So this would automatically catch items at scale. You don't have to manually enter it on every document. Things like that payroll export we talked about, or HR reports or client data that shouldn't be included in an AI prompt won't make it. Then you can apply conditional access for approved devices only. This is where we can require multi-factor authentication, enforcing compliance policies. We make sure that Copilot can only work on company managed devices on a trusted network location, which would allow which would make sure that sensitive information wouldn't be accessible through personal laptops, home networks, or unmanaged browsers. All right, in the next section here, right, we have it as monitoring and oversight. Here's where we need to track Copilot activity with audit logs and DLP alerts. You want visibility into who's prompting what and when against data sources. This is not about micromanaging employees. It's about identifying risk, internal or external. Next, we need a plan to investigate unusual prompt activity, right? It's one thing to alert it, but if someone is repeatedly querying financial data or referencing client records, that might be malicious or could be a permissions gap or a training issue or allowed. But either way, we need to define who is getting the alerts and who is investigating, how you prevent a repeat. Sorry, this is how you prevent a repeat of what I talked about in Jordan's case, where an overpositioned data made salaries visible through Copilot. And finally, we need to communicate with employees about what's being monitored. Like everything else security related, transparency is key. Employees should understand what's being monitored. That is not surveillance. It's about protecting them and ultimately the company and the data that they rely on. When people know what's allowed and what's logged, they make better decisions. All of the steps that I just talked about here is a help to reduce shadow AI. It lowers employees turning to unapproved device AI tools like ChatGPT or browser extensions. Because the company provides a safe, well-configured alternative, there's no need to go through workarounds. So if we look at Daniel's example, the client emailed full of sensitive data. He would not have put the company unknowingly at risk because this would have been defined him already by a policy and backed by governance. Let's say he chose to break the company's policy anyway, it would have automatically been stopped and logged in real time. So I guess the overall thought here with setup and visibility is knowing exactly what Copilot has access to, where it can be reached, how it's being used, and then actually configuring the controls and oversight. It all works together to make sure it delivers value and does not create a risk for your organization.
Exactly. And thank you for, talking about the setup, Ken. So I'm going to take it here from you because I think everyone who's attended all of our webinars today, I do see a couple of familiar names. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, I think I've mentioned training users quite a bit over the last few sessions. So going to keep hammering that home here, with training your human firewall. I've said it plenty of times, your people are your best defense if they know what to do. So you're going to want to make AI use training mandatory and trackable. You're going to want to add AI policies like the one you just went over to your employee handbook, reinforce safe prompting, which means no PII credentials or financial data unless explicitly allowed and everything has been set up securely and meets compliance requirements. You're also going to want to include AI-driven phishing simulations in awareness training. We're starting to see those in a lot of the tools that we use for simulated phishing training. So we can obviously get into discussions about that if anybody's interested towards the end of the seminar here. But also, shadow AI shortcuts can expose your organization to serious risks. But with the right training and controls, your people become the strongest firewall. Block risky tools, promote safe internal AI use, and empower your team with knowledge. Remember, security is everybody's responsibility, and ongoing education, that's very key. So as we wrap up today's session, let's talk about what you can do next to secure your organization's AI adoption. I mentioned before, always happy to help here at Macro. So first things that you want to do, build your AI acceptable use policy. Make sure everyone knows what's allowed and what's not. Configure Microsoft 365 for secure Copilot use. You're going to want to set up the right controls and guardrails so Copilot only accesses the data that it should. And again, train your teams on AI safety. Empower your people to train AI tools confidently and securely. Get ongoing governance and compliance support, stay up to date with best practices, and keep your policies fresh. And if you need help, like I said, remember, we here at Macro can always help make Copilot safe for work. So that wraps up today's seminar. Now we're going to get into questions. So be sure to drop them into the chat. I do see a couple of items already coming in. So Jen asks, should AI safety training be separate from cybersecurity training or combined?
You want me to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
It should be separate. So it's a separate tool. Now, if there's, I guess there's two parts, right? So we're gonna, in our training recommendations, there's AI phishing attempts, right? So that's role based on, all right, you're in finance, you use, this system, this is how it's going to target you, and it knows and it tailors it to you, right? So that's going to go in your normal cybersecurity training. But
Right.
if we're talking about Copilot, ChatGPT, whatever the tool that your company goes with, that's a separate training module that needs to happen, and that happens in correlation with your policy. So this is completely separate, and it needs to happen at least once a year. So if you do quarterly training, we're not saying one quarter is based on Copilot. No, it's completely separate. Just like HIPAA training and for whatever the compliance training is separate from cybersecurity.
Yeah, I would say it probably needs to be very defined, right? Around the tool that you're using, what compliance you got to meet. Yeah. Okay. So trying to look for any other questions.
We answered everything. Look at that.
Yeah. We got one more. Do you think regulators, HIPAA, PCI, et cetera, will explicitly include AI in the next few years? I know my answer is probably yes. For those of you who don't know, I do come from a medical background, so I did work in a local hospital for quite a bit. Had to obviously stay compliant with HIPAA. So, Ken, I would say you're probably in agreement there, right?
I mean, you would think so. I know, and yeah, if you expanded it out, how does it not? But I have no insight on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can speak to the trainings. Those were things that were updated very explicitly every single year, became mandatory for us. So yeah, no, I could definitely see that being included within the next couple of years, especially as adoption grows across the space. All right.
There's another one here.
Yep.
It says, how can a managed service provider like Macro help us operationalize all this? So we have a checklist of items. It's pretty extensive. Maybe it's like 100 items or so that we would go through and walk with you to identify what information, what compliance, what you have already set up, and where we need to go before we start this, and how's the rollout going to be. So it's essentially the same process that we just went through, right? We have to understand about your organization, what if we don't already. We have to make sure you have the safeguards in check, and then how are you going to be using this? Right, so are we going to be allowing this in meetings? Are we going to be allowing this to access files? What are we actually allowing Copilot to do? And then what information is in those items? And then we'll start talking about rolling it out and what safeguards you need. So yeah,
Yeah, I think that answers all the questions too, and that that last question really kind of ties into our last slide. So let's get into that, and that's me really telling you guys that we're always here to help. As usual with these webinars, the recording is going to be emailed, and we are offering a Copilot setup workshop. So as always, you guys have my information there at the bottom. For those of you who do work with me, feel free to call my number, email me directly. Be happy to help set you guys up with that.
cool.
All right, so that wraps up today's presentation. Thank you everyone for joining today. If there's any additional questions that you might have after the presentation, feel free to shoot me an email. I can loop you in with Ken if it's something more technical that he would want to go over with you. And yeah, we'll see you all in the next one.
Bye, guys.